Hello everybody. So it's Sunday, August the 13th. Today is the day of the Venus Cazimi. Venus and the Sun are both at 20 degrees of Leo. The moon today, as I'm recording this, is at 21 degrees of Cancer, meaning that we're in a balsamic lunar phase. The end of a lunation, the end of a lunar cycle, leading up to a Leo new moon. And the Leo new moon is going to be in a perfect square to Uranus, basically. And I guess one of the things that I should talk about is that I've been going through a period of creative insecurity, I suppose, around the time of this Venus being combust and Venus being Cazimi, and there are certain things that happened that I would consider either like social blunders, or well, let's just put it this way. I have my own stuff going on. I have my own issues and stuff like that, and I'm doing I like astrology. I like making astrology videos, and what is it that brought me to astrology? It's hard. I had one person do a reading for me once that made me give me this impression that there was something going on with the astrology, that it resonated, that it was something real there. But this was not somebody that I knew very well, and I can't say even. It's not like I got into astrology because I had a lot of friends that were astrologers, or I had a lot of friends in the scene or something like that. If anything, getting into astrology was kind of like a break away from the character or away from what I was doing before I ever got into it, right? And then over the course of time that I've been doing astrology, I don't know if it's personality conflicts or if it's because I don't know, if like the way I express myself, or if it's there could be gender stuff around it, trying to interact with people, and then there's this thing that when there are people who are much more successful, who have much more of a following than you, I've had to go so you have to like roll with the punches, I guess, right? Like that. Because it's not the first. Don't want to talk about the specific thing that happened, and I don't want to dwell on that too much. But it's just like over the years of being interested in astrology, I have had astrologers that some astrologers I might like them more than others, but like for some reason, you have people block you, you have people delete you, you have people say bad things about you, and it basically put me in this position where I didn't really feel very comfortable about the stuff that I was doing. I was told that, just to put duct tape over my mouth and not express myself, right? And so I tried to just the whole issue around Venus combust is that when Venus is in a weakened position, and it's kind of like Venus is dying to be reborn, right? And I don't know, and I think it's worth talking about in the sense, rather than getting hung up on the specific details, because I've seen other people leading up to this talking about sort of like people maybe who are working on a project like writing a book, having a lot of insecurity about the book, like what to name their book, what to call their book, or people who are, content creators feeling like they're in a jam, like a creative block or something. And I think anyways, and it could also be because Venus has to do with, friends and socializing and making bonds and stuff like that, that all that stuff is weakened by Venus being burnt up by the rays of the sun, right? And with the moon in Cancer, that's the balsamic phase, is that people often talk about, letting go and releasing and all this kind of stuff. And so, I think at least the astrology helps if you put it in this perspective that it's a moment of kind of letting go and releasing. And it's almost like, like when you play frisbee with dogs or whatever, that you can't throw the frisbee again unless the dog lets go of the frisbee. And then if we have too much attachment and we have too much grasping onto that thing, we have no ability to let go and to allow the game to keep playing, right? There's stuff going on in my personal life that I feel like if I spent too much time on it, it would be kind of getting bogged down in my own personal stuff and it may not be so relevant to everybody. But I guess I could quickly talk. There's certain things that I thought were pretty uncanny because I had a friend visiting, and this is the whole thing about Venus retrograde, is that I think typically what people expect from Venus retrogrades is that they expect some sort of thing from the past, whether that's a past relationship or a past friendship or past social dynamic to surface. And I had a friend come and visit me who I hadn't seen in a while, who lives in another country, but the circumstance around him coming back was that his dad was dying. So it's not really like a very cheery circumstance for seeing your friend. So I was a bit sensitive about that, or I don't know. I mean, I've had to deal with the death of my own dad. But one of the reasons why I'm bringing this up, though, is that I watched one of Adam Elenbaas's videos for this transit, and Adam Elenbaas was specifically talking about this whole death of the father as an archetype, which works on whether that's you could apply that in a broader religious sense of like the death of God and Nietzsche and the modern time or search for meaning and stuff like that. And you could also apply that to the actual, more mundane sense of family life and the missing father figure and all this kind of stuff. And so, Adam Elenbaas was mentioning that specifically in relation to Sun square Jupiter, right? And so Jupiter is in Taurus, and Sun is in Leo in that square. Now the square is closer to Uranus, though. And there's certain things about Uranus that has to do with, people talk about Uranus in terms of freedom, right? They also talk about it in terms of certain, like, breakthroughs in technology. And there's something that I noticed anyways when my friend came to visit, that I looked at his astrology chart, and that I noticed that he had a perfect moon very closely conjunct to Uranus. So the theme of, first of all, there's the death of a father being an archetype happening. And then the visitation of a friend who represents a moon Uranus kind of personality. Were both very indicative of the whole dynamic playing out. So I think it's worth pointing out. And the thing is also that this particular friend has been particularly influential on me. In the sense that when I was much younger, I had a falling out with a group of friends, but this was a friend that was not so much tied into that, and that I kind of moved on from this friend. It's like having one thing fall apart, but you've got another stepping stone to keep going and stuff like that. And this friend, particularly, I looked up to as a guy who had good taste in music, who introduced me to a lot of bands, who I used to go out to shows a lot with and stuff like that. And I didn't end up doing very much with him while he was in town, because I think he was mainly dealing with his stuff to do with his family and the death of his dad and stuff like that. But he did tell me about some music venues in the city that I should check out and stuff like that. But this is the kind of thing that, again, I don't know if I want to get too stuck in my own personal stuff around this, but what can I say? I'm the kind of person who struggled with some mental health issues in the past, and prior to COVID, I was making a effort to get out and go to do the things that I like doing, to not let whatever I've got going on get in the way of living a full life and stuff like this, and try to whatever appreciate the things that I appreciate, and but I'm often, this whole thing too is like moving the like part of what I think got me in trouble with mental health was going too hard in the rave scene and doing drugs for a phase of time when I was younger, right? And so I've been trying to be making effort to be more sober and to avoid things that are not healthy for me. I don't know if that is maybe something to consider, but what am I trying to say here is that but the thing is, I kind of ran into this problem with COVID in that when COVID happened, before COVID happened, I was making a lot of electronic music, and that was like a kind of main outlet for creative expression. And I'm not just saying this, talking about this because whatever. I don't want to get caught up in my own personal stuff so much, but Uranus has been described in the astrology textbooks as distinctively having to do with electronic music and rave culture and all that kind of stuff. If you read Cosmos and Psyche, Rick Tarnas just says straight out that's a Uranus thing, right? And so, especially, like a moon, my friend has moon conjunct Uranus. For a while, he was a DJ. For a while, I used to hang out and go to stuff like that. And he doesn't DJ anymore, but I was telling him that I kind of have that strong association with him. He's also much more into that Bitcoin cryptocurrency stuff or whatever. And that could also be a moon Uranus kind of thing, or anything, there's this kind of technological thing, and also there's not just that, but there's this sort of free spirit of like freedom and liberation and stuff like that goes with Uranus. And I think there's this kind of thing where it's like I was talking about with the frisbee kind of thing, though, there's like your attachments to, first of all, there's emotional attachments. There's also attachments to the identity that's formed in relationship, or that that if you have your identity as a creator is defined by, the whatever. I make music that reminds me of memories where I'm, or whatever, where you feel like you identify with a group where you belong in, or something like that. But one of the things that I thought was interesting about this whole thing was that I don't know if I think it could also be like I was going through this thing where I was recording astrology videos and then uploading them and then hiding them and then taking them down and then making more and then uploading them and hiding them, and just feeling kind of like creatively paralyzed. And I don't know if it was like the presence of my friend being around that kind of gave me performance anxiety, or if it was like also this whole thing that happened where I don't know, I kind of, it's one of those things where like you could say that you made an unconscious comment, but there's some sort of, I don't want to get into that. I don't want to get into the drama, but there's this whole thing of just not being very secure in the sense of belonging to like a community of astrologers, of basically feeling like it's like I don't know, it's not represented in the people that I actually have in my life, right? Of like, it's not like I hang out with a bunch of astrologers. It's not like I have a bunch of astrologer friends or something, or that if I do make friends with astrologers, I'm like, oh, this is somebody like the old ladies who are, like decades and decades older than me that I don't feel like I have anything in common with, and that I don't really feel like I belong with them. And then if I try to interact, I say the wrong thing and they block me, or I try to, or like, it's this whole thing that if I have some sort of like idea about stuff and I try to like, there's another time where there's if I talk to friends on the internet, they're like, oh yeah, do you know this astrologer? She you might think she's really cool or something. I'm like, oh yeah, I tried talking to her and she deleted me. So it's like this kind of thing where I don't feel accepted in this sort of scene, and I don't really know where I belong and stuff like this. And that what am I trying to say? But my friend you know, my friend who I have more of an association with in terms of like music, you know, he was trying to relate sort of like that he is into a lot of kind of new age stuff, and that he has friends that are kind of in this new age scene, and that like I don't know, that he's not really into astrology as much though, but he kind of like can understand, you know, people making content that is, you know, you're trying to like channel something or express something, um, or that like he was being supportive and encouraging for me to keep going, to keep making astrology videos and just plug through it, and that maybe, you know, if I just keep going, that it'll, you know, it'll be all right, or that I can, you know, grow my following or something like that. But and it seemed like there's more momentum around that kind of stuff than, well, I mean, personally, I have to admit that regardless of, I don't know, the whole whether I identify as a musician or something like that, that I'm kind of getting bored of just trying to make techno music or something. Like, there's like so many guys out there who buy a bunch of music gear and make kind of, you know, hardware techno that kind of sounds the same, and it's sort of, I don't really know even how interested that I am in that this point in time. But yeah, I also have this. It is, I don't know. I think I'm kind of look at it now as having. It's not like you have to just do one thing, but that you have. Let's put it this way. You know, I was watching a David Bowie interview, and he was talking about how he did painting, even though he was maybe more well known for being a musician. But he was saying that like when he had some kind of a creative block or a creative obstacle with his music that he was doing, he would go and take out his canvases and his paints, and he would paint through his creative block, right? That he's like, and that the so then this thing that it's, you know, like, I don't know how many people care about David Bowie's paintings in comparison to his music, right? Like, if he's a well-respected painter or not, but that to him, it's kind of like you have a creative process that has these different outlets, whether that's making music, whether that's making astrology videos, whether that's doing something else. But there's certain things of saying that, you know, or you could also be like, there's things that you can do that are like self-care, like getting exercise, or, you know, and it's sort of like this kind of idea that like if you don't have to identify as being a jock or a sports guy, but that rather than just sitting at a desk being like, what am I going to do, say for my astrology video, it might be, you know, it might be healthy to be like, well, I'm going to go out for a jog or a walk, or I'm going to go play some sports and take my mind off of it, rather than just try to focus all my energy in making this one thing work. It actually is maybe healthier to have these different outlets and stuff like that. And that, you know, even if I never make it as a musician, that you know, having that creative outlet, you know, even if people who watch my astrology videos never listen to my music, that it's a part of this creative process that is interconnected, even if it seems like they're very separate things, right? And so there's something about the meaning of Uranus is that I think what it wants to do, or ideally what it does, is that if you have energy that is invested into certain things that have become stagnant, or like it's just sort of like not fresh anymore, like Uranus wants to free up energy. And it's not to take it away from you. It's not to take things out of your life. It's not to remove things. But sometimes that can happen. But I think it's mainly to like, where is stuff gone stagnant? Where is stuff kind of dead? And where can that be freed up to create new life, so that we have more vital creative energy in the present moment? And at the time of making this video, I feel like with the sort of the balsamic moon in Cancer, there is, that's kind of the theme, because it's like this waning balsamic moon leading up to the new moon in Leo, and then who knows, maybe there may be something new, unforeseen, that's born out of this once we have the new moon in a couple days. It's coming up real quick. But as it is, to me it feels like a kind of, I don't know. I have to say too that like earlier this year I was kind of running into this sort of like thing about whatever, my creative practice, or my identifying as a kind of an artist or a creative kind of person. But I have to admit that I feel feeling very distant from, for one thing, the music scene, from another thing, from all my friends who were influential to me to do with music and stuff like that. And one of the things that came to mind, I was thinking about Emily Dickinson, who I have to admit, I'm not super up on Emily Dickinson's work. She was a poet, but she had this sort of like reputation for being a total shut-in, basically, of like somebody who stayed at home and never went out. And that I thought it was kind of interesting that I'll put a link in the comments, I guess, but if you look at Emily Dickinson's Astrology, let's see, I think I still have it here, yeah. Emily Dickinson had Sun at 17 Sagittarius and Venus at 15 Sagittarius, and she had the Moon at 23 degrees Libra. So that is still, it's similar, I think. It wasn't, I have to say though that the Venus in Emily Dickinson's chart wasn't retrograde, it was in direct motion. But it was still similar in the sense that the Venus in Emily Dickinson's chart was so close to the Sun that it was very much combust and afflicted by being so close to the rays of the Sun, and that the Moon was in this balsamic waning position. And so there's a sort of thing of being like, I don't know if anybody else relates to this, but at least in my own experience with this transit, it feels resonant anyways, that they're being, I don't know, like, I basically feel like when it comes to music, like, Bob Dylan had this thing that he was saying that, like, creativity has a lot to do with the environment that you're in, right? And I'm in a kind of environment where I left Nanaimo, this place where I was living before, during the pandemic, and I had some health issues, and I was really sick, and I was like living at my family's house here. And the whole thing is that I was kind of looking forward to, before the health issues got really bad, I was like, well, at least in the mainland, there are, there's more music going on in the city and stuff like that. And maybe I could get back into the music scene in the city. Oh, what was cool about Nanaimo is Nanaimo did have it was almost being spoiled, because like I had all these venues I could go to that were just 5 minutes away from my house, and you could just kind of like on a whim saunter down and go check out some music or something like that. Whereas, I live a little bit farther away, but there's more stuff going on in the city. But there's been this psychological kind of barrier where I've just been basically living like a shut-in at my mom's house and not going out. And that there's this kind of thing, like if you're the kind of music you like making is like, like electronic music or dance music, and it's like I'm living with my mom's 70 and she just wants to nap all the time, and my sister lives with me too, and she's into horse riding stuff and equestrian stuff. And there's like, I think that, I do know that there are people maybe who are into like, have different hobbies. Like I was saying before with David Bowie, how he paints as well as doing music, that there are people who are into stuff like equestrian, and they also like to go out dancing and having fun in the city. But it's just kind of like this kind of environment where it's like, if my creative practice is making music, it's kind of like it's just being treated, you're just like a nuisance making a bunch of noise, and like all, around people who just want it to be quiet, and your neighbors are a bunch of old people who probably, who it just feels like that you're in this environment where you're just like you're doing something completely against the grain, and that nobody likes it and nobody supports it, and that it's like being what I think there's something beautiful about music when you are doing, like, when a person is performing for an audience, and it's like not to say that it's all about just pleasing the audience, but like you're doing it because you're doing it, giving people something to enjoy, right? You're giving, if you have a good night out dancing, you're all sharing in this communal experience of having a good time. And then if it becomes something where it's just you having this kind of like, it's like masturbation or something like that, you're just getting off on your own thing while everybody else is annoyed by it. It's like, it doesn't feel very good. It's not very, like, you want to do something that helps other people. You don't want to just, be creative for the sake of your own self-indulgence, right? Or you don't want to just buy a bunch of shit, because, surround yourself with a bunch of toys that you think are cool, and then rather than having any personal social relationships, you just retreat into your own little world, and that, and I was kind of having that kind of, I always run into that, and there's some sort of tension there about, like, also the fact that my friends that I used to go out dancing with, that they really do not feel like they're present in my life anymore, and I was just sort of like, maybe it is time just to like let go of that and put that all behind me, and because I don't want to just, and I don't want it to be like a nostalgia trip, right? And that I don't want, like, I think I've got to, like, this thing of approaching your life fresh and actually just responding to the reality that you're in as it presents itself, and being in harmony with that, rather than just being stuck, like having an ego that was formed when you're 20 years old, and then like the years and years and go by, and there's this part of you that, still wishes you were back, you were the same person you were when you were like 21 years old or 22 years old, and now you're in your 40s or something like that. But I don't know, maybe I kind of look around at other people, and like, some people don't actually change that much, right? Or there's this whole thing about like living life as an extended adolescent or something like that, and I don't know. I've been maybe my whole thing about being like taking courses on Shakespeare and stuff like that, at least it gives me something, a different direction to put my attention to, or to read different books or something like that. But hopefully this isn't just a ramble, right? But I'm just trying to express what this transit has been like for me. But I think one of the things that I've also noticed about this transit is that I like my actual lived experience, like I said, of the world is pretty, feels pretty isolating. And then, but it's kind of funny because like my friend who came to visit me was like kind of reminding me that like, hey, I watch your videos and I like listening to what you have to say, and it's like, oh, so like it's kind of, and then that's what's kind of funny is that I made a video previously, like one of these videos that I recorded that I decided to take down. Instead of talking about this friend that, I think positively of, I think I was talking more about other past Venus retrogrades and things that happened where I told off friends that I had more problems with, that I wasn't as enthusiastic about and stuff like that. But, I think these are just two sides of the same coin, right? Like you have the things that you like and the things that you don't like, or what you're trying to attaching onto and what you're pushing away and all this kind of stuff. But I thought there was something about the way that I did that was rude or unkind. And then I see a lot of stuff though on the internet where people are saying that, you know, like don't trust these guys who are nice guys, you know, like these guys who just tell you what you want to hear, like they're just, you know, they're just as bad as, so I don't want to, you know, just try to smooth over it all for the sake of being a nice guy, but I think there's like like I had this idea when I was trying to figure out how to approach doing videos about this transit, that there's oh no, I'm not going to get into that. I don't think that's a good one to get into. Well, I mean, just to tell you what I'm thinking of, anyways, there's this movie called The Cruise with Timothy Speed Levitch. And there's this one scene where he like he's walking on, was it the Manhattan Bridge or some bridge in New York, right? And he's going off on all these all these memories of different people in his life, and he's just like getting it off his chest, and like, you know, of like and it just like completely, like, you know, completely just raw and just like express it. And he was saying that this is the kind of thing though, is that there's this I think it actually maybe goes with this, there's this people another thing though is that, you know, this Leo energy, I've been hearing people talk about how Leo is associated with the heart center, right? Cancer is kind of like the breast, the bosom, or something like that. Leo is kind of more of like the solar plexus, kind of heart center, the will, but also like the, you know, it's all kind of this heart energy, right? And there's this kind of like being able to like express yourself or whatever. And one of the things that Timothy Speed Levitch was talking about is like how difficult it is to have freedom of expression, right? And I think that's something that I hear a lot of people talk about these days in terms of political stuff, right? But I mean, people always talk about it in terms of like, you know, who knows? These people, there's these people who are like talking about the climate in terms of like censorship or political correctness or something like that. And it's like, you know, they talk a lot about not being able to express their opinions, right? But I mean, I think this is something about like more than just like your political beliefs or your opinions or your, you know, your anti-woke politics. It's more to do with like the actually expressing what's in your heart and stuff like that. And that, like, Timothy Speed Levitch was just saying like how difficult it is to find a situation where you have room to do that, right? Because there's so many, you know, where like we live in a world that's always kind of shutting down that kind of expression, right? And that if you are like a vibrant, creative kind of poet, like if you're not, you know, it just kind of like kills the creative spirit or something like that, and you need to kind of like fight for it in a way, right? And I don't know, like I don't know if trying to do astrology broadcasts, astrology forecasts is really, you know, the right avenue for me expressing the truth of my heart, you know, in a poetic kind of way or something like this. But I think it does maybe go with this transit of the, you know, Venus in the heart of the sun in Leo, you know, like the lion's roar, right? Like there's something about, what do the Buddhists say? They say that, you know, this truth, you know, you don't have to defend the truth so much that the truth roars like a lion, right? On its own. Well, look, we're already at more than half an hour. Again, I have to also say that I think some of the other reasons why I was taking down these videos is that I think when it comes to astrology and divination, especially astrology, I think that there's some way that, even though I think the process of reading the signs, reading them as kind of omens in a symbolic way, there's a sort of like symbolic kind of consciousness that is not entirely rational, right? That has more, but there's a way I think that I don't know. Like, I'm not one of these kind of. I do meditate, and I know there are a lot of meditation people who are like, don't believe the story that your mind is telling you. You know, the mind is just some bad guy who's there to trick you or get you caught up in identifications and attachments and stuff like that. And you know, I'm not. I know that I do also. Rob Brezsny has been talking about how much he is really opposed to that kind of spirituality. And I actually, you know, I work with teachers that might be more in line with that kind of spirituality, right? But there's something about, I think, the way that the mind works, though, is that even there's something about divination where the value of divination, I think, is its ability to bypass the rational mind in the same way that I think a good piece of artwork can, or kind of like the way that poetry, you know, that poetry still uses words and language, but it uses words and language to sort of address that which is beyond words and language, and that in such a way that may change the way that we think about things, or that change our perspective on things, and that, or this idea that there's some kind of a pre-verbal, pre-linguistic kind of truth, and that we, by reading the omens of nature and the signs around us, that we can kind of like access something that bypasses the filtering of our rational minds, and that I think, you know, that maybe it's not wrong to you know, to see that this thing about getting caught up in the mind can be a detriment to the astrology practice, right? But at the same time, I like reading books, and I like, you know, there's another kind of point that we do actually need to use our rational minds as well, right? At sometimes, but that you got to be careful when your rational mind just becomes a defense mechanism to try to avoid the truth of what's going on or whatever. And I don't know, I think everybody has their own shadow and has their own blind spot. There are things that they don't want to look at, or the things that may not be appropriate for putting out in a public astrology video and stuff like this, right? But the way there's a kind of a truth that just bypasses all of that, and I think that this is kind of like the sort of Uranus transit just wants to like bypass, you know, just free up all this sort of stuff. Like, it's like, you know, when defragging your computer, like, oh, I don't know if anybody does that anymore. That was an old thing that people used to do when you had to defrag your hard drive, or just sort of, it's like freeing up all the temporary files, you know, clearing out the cache of your whatever. It just, I don't know. Again, like I'm saying before, I've got this ongoing thing of, I don't know, maybe it's me that has personality issues, that I don't get along with people very well. I don't, you know, don't make friends as easily as other people. But I'm going to keep making astrology videos regardless. And I've been encouraged anyways by my friends to keep doing that. I don't know, maybe that, but it's sort of like I think there's like the whole thing about, there's a sort of creative vulnerability in whatever you do, right? Like if you're going to write a song and speak the truth of your heart in a song, there's a kind of vulnerability in that. If you're going to put yourself out there doing this kind of stuff, there's a kind of vulnerability in that. And there's no guarantee that, you know, you're going to be, if you try to be vulnerable, if you try to be open, there's no guarantee that anybody is going to support you. And if you try, you know, there are people that just, there'll be people that are really well established that, you know, won't, you know, you're not entitled to anything. And, you know, you're not entitled to getting a hand up from people who are in any better spot than you. And there's no guarantee that, you know, anybody's going to want, you know, to hire you to do readings and all this kind of stuff. And that, I don't know, like, it's like, this is one of the things where it's like, it may make more sense to be like, well, you just have to be tough about it and keep going. But it doesn't feel that, you know, it just feels like becoming more and more vulnerable as you go through. It doesn't feel like or at least it doesn't feel like I'm getting more tough about it, right? And being more vulnerable doesn't really make me necessarily inclined to want to expose myself. I don't want to expose my vulnerability, right? I don't know. But that's kind of how it's been feeling for me anyways. Yeah, thanks for watching.